In this video, I'm going to talk about what it was like to film at Noksapyeong, also the challenges involved and how I had to use compositing to overcome those challenges. For the record, every difficulty I had with editing the Seoul Subway Song 2 came down to poor preparation on my part, as you'll see in this video. Location scouting in advance is extremely important, but so is spending enough time setting up a shot at that location. For example, I discovered during location scouting at the station that I would have to film this scene on my phone instead of on my dedicated camera because only my phone can do a wide angle shot that captures both side escalators. What I hadn't thought about was the fact that I don't have a tripod for my phone. Thankfully, I had brought along tape and scissors, so I literally taped my phone to the tripod and that worked well enough. During an early meeting with Seoul Metro, I asked which stations they recommend filming at, particularly stations that are scenic or unique looking, and their first recommendation was Noksapyeong. I'm familiar with Noksapyeong and the unique layout, but my first assumption was that there must be other stations that are equally as unique and interesting that I just wasn't aware of yet. Also, it feels like everybody would use Noksapyeong like for this kind of video and to talk about the subway, so it felt like a cliche that I didn't want to necessarily use. Now, there were some unique stations that I wasn't aware of, like Sindapyeok, which is featured in quite a few scenes in my music video and which I'll talk about in a different video. But generally, if you don't know about any particularly amazing looking subway stations, it might be because they don't exist. I did a lot of location scouting, and to be honest, like, Noksapyeong does stand out as being unique. For example, I visited every station on Line 9's eastern half, and with the exception of Hansong Baekjeok, they really all do look kind of the same. So I gave in and I wrote Noksapyeong into the lyrics. I don't have a lot of behind the scenes clips as we were working with a limited battery life, but there are alternate takes that didn't make it in, which I'd like to show, particularly of the plant scenes. There was one take that was pretty cute, but it didn't have kind of the same momentum as the take I ended up using. For the escalator scene, I knew I would have to do a bit of compositing, but it kind of ended up a little bit of a nightmare. To be clear, compositing is just when you combine different elements that aren't on scene in one shot to create a cohesive scene or shot. For example, literally putting anything in front of a green screen or blue screen chroma key counts as compositing, assuming that you're going to add in a background. In this case, I didn't use green screen or chroma key or anything, but I put a lot of pieces together to create one coherent looking scene. There was some compositing that was inevitable, such as using multiple takes of myself riding the escalators or blocking out parts of the background to remove any passersby. But the last shot I took with Dota down below messed everything up because my tripod wasn't tall enough to clear the railing for an unobstructed view, so I had to manually hold the camera at a better angle, which meant that the perspective of that one shot would no longer match the other shots. This ended up not being that noticeable in the final video for a few reasons. First, the sides of the shot with the escalators were warped to begin with because of the wide angle. And second, I further warped the sides so that you could see my two selves a bit better. And then third, the different shots tend to overlap in the background, and the design of the station is so unique to begin with that it's pretty hard to tell where the lines are overlapping or if they're supposed to look the way that they look in this video. And also, the entire shot is 2 seconds long and there are already 3 points of interest that you're going to be paying attention to. There's Dota in the bottom and there's me on the left side and the right side. I do kind of hate how short this scene is and also how short a lot of other scenes are, but to be fair, this scene is not dense with content. The lyrics and visuals express a singular idea. There are escalators for vertical mobility. You don't really need more than 2 seconds to convey that, and if the scene went 1 additional second longer, it would just be me going further up and down the escalators. So aside from getting the logistics of the camera height and tripod wrong, this scene wasn't tough to film. I want to stress that we had explicit permission to film in this station, and if you're gonna film something with a camera and tripod, it's technically illegal to film in a public place in Seoul unless you have permission. It's okay to film with your phone, but if you're like setting up a production, you need permission. So we filmed around 4 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon, and it wasn't quite rush hour yet, so there weren't too many people, but it was just a matter of waiting until nobody was going up or down the escalators. Unfortunately, in one shot, there were some people behind me and I had to get rid of them, as you'll see. I honestly feel little details like that, like masking out people people in the background who are moving, or even their shadows or reflections, is very important, especially in a scene that's only 2 seconds long. You don't want any distracting elements. You want people to be able to focus on the subjects of that scene. It's also a deliberate choice to kind of portray this station as being empty rather than full of people, which it often is, partly because there's a law about filming people without the permission, but also just not wanting to portray crowds. And also there's some kind of heightened reality if I'm showing myself being the only person in the station, or in this case, 2 of the only people in the station. And speaking of heightened reality, in this piano scene, which was also shot at Noksapyeong, I emphasized the blue of Dota's costume so it would pop. Because he's literally a cartoon, and his presence on location in these scenes is a bit jarring. It's a bit incongruous, so I leaned into it and made him visually stand out a bit more. I don't really mind if that made you think twice about whether he was inserted via green screen. There are a couple scenes in the music video where he's in front of a green screen, but at Noksapyeong, that's really him in every scene. This giant mascot was on location and people saw him, although weirdly in a lot of cases people didn't seem to pay attention. I don't know what that says about the people around there, if they're just used to giant mascots popping up. But on the whole, it was kind of amazing to film at this station, because this was maybe the most crowded location we picked to film, and also the most scenic, the largest. While we were filming the scene, and especially after we finished filming the scene, I thought wow, I can't believe we're actually doing this and we're making the video that I kind of dreamed that we would be able to make. So yeah, even though I had some reluctance about filming at Noksapyeong to begin with, I'm really glad we went with it.